Hello class, my name is Clayton Pye, and we're going to be discussing The Hunger Games, as well as the hero's journey that Katniss Everdeen will be embracing upon, in both the novelization as well as the movie. Okay, so we're going to be talking first in the form of a bell ringer, known as a open-ended question. So I want you to take a few moments, just think of a character that you consider as a hero. Once you think of that hero, in what ways does that character embrace the hero's journey? So, for instance, I think of a character known as Anakin Skywalker, who started off as a slave, and eventually he becomes a hero, and finds himself becoming a villain, and then he finds himself becoming a hero again at the last minute. And in a lot of ways, he could be argued as a slave, basically throughout his entire life until the very end, when he saved his son. Okay. And that's going to tie in into this activity that we have in store. So these were some characters that I just thought of that embraced the hero's journey. So first off, I figured we can talk about Harry Potter, who's known as the boy who lived. He endures through the hero's journey once he basically is forced in a situation where his parents die when he was a young baby, and just basically becomes known as the boy who lived because he was the only one that lived that night. And it's prophesied that him and Lord Voldemort would basically kill each other. So his life changed forever because of a mere prophecy, when it could have been countless other possibilities instead of Harry Potter, but Lord Voldemort considered the Potter family as the biggest threat, so therefore Lord Voldemort created this hero. Okay, next we're going to be talking about Iron Man. So Iron Man, or otherwise known as Tony Stark, I think his journey is actually very interesting, because he went from being a very selfish individual, and eventually becomes a very selfless individual. And now, people could argue that's because he finally decided to wear the mantle of Iron Man. Well, that's not exactly true. He changed once he basically gained allies, and he really changed once he gained a family. Once he gained a family, his morality changed. It was no longer just about him. And in the end, it did cost him his life, but because of his sacrifice, at least in the cinematic universe, others could live. Okay. Wolverine, another character I consider interesting when it comes to cinematic reasons, because in the movie adaptations, they consider him to be a full-on hero, while in the comic books, he's considered more of an anti-hero in my opinion, where he does things just because it's in his best interest, or, hey, I'll do it. So, I think he has a very interesting hero's journey path. And Anakin Skywalker, we have already mentioned, that was once a slave, and eventually found his way, at the very end, to bring balance to the universe. And then lastly, we're talking about Katniss Everdeen, who is otherwise known as the Girl on Fire. And she hated the idea of being a hero originally, but then she eventually takes that responsibility. She takes that mantle, and eventually leads a rebellion later on in the series, but that's not the point of discussion today. Alright, got all those correct? Okay. Don't have to read all this, but what I just want you to come away with when it comes to this open-ended discussion here is when one person thinks of the Hunger Games franchise, they often just think of the films, which is not a bad thing because, films do run in today's society, like the Harry Potter films, or even the Star Wars films. Those are more common than just reading the books. But in the Hunger Games, I want to show how the novelization, as well as the film, show how Katniss Everdeen goes through the hero's journey. And the way she does it is very similar in both ways. But obviously there will be key differences in both the novelization and in the film, mainly because of time constraints and maybe perhaps a director found one thing not so important compared to the author herself. There can be countless possibilities why things differ. However, I digress. So, before we discuss what the hero's journey itself, I want to take a look at the districts themselves, mainly District 12. So, District 12, if you take a look at the numbers, is considered one of the most poorest districts within Panama. And the reason for that is because it's just a coal mining district. They don't have any transportation. They don't have really any power technology. And they're supposed to, the way they get their food is through livestock, which is District 10, or any other districts that can trade with them. That's basically the theme behind all these districts and their specializations, is because they each specialize in one thing. And well, Katniss Everdeen is a character that, excuse me, that doesn't take things for granted, because she has very, very little. The only thing that she has really to fight for are her family and her friends. And then in this picture right here, I just basically showed what each district specialized in, hence why District 12 was mining. And well, within each district, they have to give up 2 tributes every year to participate in the Hunger Games. And well, to appease the capital, like I said, they have to send 2 districts to participate in the games. 1 male and 1 female. And these tributes have to range between the ages of 12 to 18. And they must take place in a lottery system known as the reaping. Well, as we'll find out later, Katniss Everdeen, the reason why she becomes quote-unquote a tribute was because she volunteered in place for her sister to protect her. And individuals that are allowed to partake in the lottery, well, basically, if they partake in the lottery so many times, they could actually do that in exchange for supplies such as food and money. Well, Gale is one character in the story that actually entered his name 42 times. And the reason why he did that was because he just wanted to make sure his family had extra money. Or not extra money, but extra food. And he also did it to reduce the likelihood of his siblings becoming tributes. And, as an older brother myself, I understand that. I would do the same thing. And Katniss Everdeen, when she decides to basically become a tribute, when she volunteers, it is known as a lost tradition. Those individuals every individual within the 12th district were not known to volunteer. And then, just to give you kind of an idea of the 12th district and basically what people have going for them, this is a pretty good representation of what District 12 looks like, which is not good compared to what the capital will look like later on. And now, we go into the hero's journey itself, Katniss Everdeen. So when we talk about Katniss Everdeen, she is basically the hero of the story, yes. And she is a 12 district tribute by choice. And as I mentioned earlier, she does become known as the Girl on Fire. And one of her strengths, and I only mentioned one of them, she has plenty of them, which is using a bow. Some other strengths that she does have, though, is that she is a very selfless individual. Therefore, similar to Iron Man later, where he became selfless. And she volunteered to become the tribute to protect her own sister. And the reason why she did that was because an older sibling, she didn't want to see her sister experience the horrors of the Hunger Games. And another strength that makes her selfless is that when her father died in a terrible accident, she took that mantle of the one protecting the family and bringing income to her family. So she took the place of her father, which is not a bad thing at all. And here I'm going to show a video of what the Hunger, or not the Hunger Games, but what a hero's journey entails. Okay.
What do Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo all have in common with the heroes of ancient myths? What if I told you they are all variants of the same hero? Do you believe that? Joseph Campbell did. He studied myths from all over the world and published a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, retelling dozens of stories and explaining how each represents the monomyth, or hero's journey. So, what is the hero's journey? Think of it as a cycle. The journey begins and ends in the hero's ordinary world, but the quest passes through an unfamiliar, special world. Along the way, there are some key events. Think about your favorite book or movie. Does it follow this pattern? Status quo, that's where we start. 1 o'clock, call to adventure. The hero receives a mysterious message, an invitation, a challenge. 2 o'clock, assistance. The hero needs some help, probably from someone older, wiser. 3 o'clock, departure. The hero crosses the threshold from his normal, safe home and enters the special world and adventure. We're not in Kansas anymore. 4 o'clock, trials. Being a hero is hard work. Our hero solves a riddle, slays a monster, escapes from a trap. 5 o'clock, approach. It's time to face the biggest ordeal, the hero's worst fear. 6 o'clock, crisis. This is the hero's darkest hour. He faces death and possibly even dies, only to be reborn. 7 o'clock, treasure. As a result, the hero claims some treasure, special recognition, or power. 8 o'clock, result. This can vary between stories. Do the monsters bow down before the hero, or do they chase him as he flees from the special world? 9 o'clock, return. After all that adventure, the hero returns to his ordinary world. 10 o'clock, new life. This quest has changed the hero. He has outgrown his old life. 11 o'clock, resolution. All the tangled plot lines get straightened out. 12 o'clock, status quo, but upgraded to a new level. Nothing is quite the same once you're a hero. Many popular books and movies follow this ancient formula pretty closely. But let's see how well The Hunger Games fits the hero's journey template. When does Katniss Everdeen hear a call to adventure that gets the story moving? When her sister's name is called from the lottery. How about assistance? Is anyone going to help her on her adventure? Hey, Mitch. What about departure? Does she leave her ordinary world? She gets on a train to the capital. Okay, so you get the idea. What do you have in common with Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo?
Alright, so I think that did a pretty good job of just giving like a brief description of the hero's journey, as well as what Katniss Everdeen will be embracing later on in the story. But now we will move on within the hero's journey. So the ordinary world. So Katniss, as I mentioned earlier, she lives in the 12th district. She lives with her mother and her sister in a district that's not considered the wealthiest, and took the place of her father to care for her family. So basically what that entails is hunting for food and just finding any way to make some form of money for her family. With her friend Gale as well, who she hunts with. And Gale is considered ordinary world to her because it is her everyday life. Refusal to call. Second stage. So on the day of the reaping, Katniss and Gale have thoughts to run away originally. However, both want to escape the horror that they could possibly face if they are chosen for the games. That was a bad typo on my end, so I apologize there. However, Katniss basically refuses at the end because she knows, hey, who's going to take care of my family? And this is where she's still kind of confused about some feelings that she has for Gale early on, even though it's kind of established that she doesn't share those same feelings for him that he has for her, which, that's a thing later on in the series, so we won't get into that now. Okay, call to the adventure, which is the departure stage. So Katniss' sister got picked by the Reaping. And as a older sibling, she didn't want to see her sister go through that. So in a last-ditch attempt, she basically volunteered as tribute, and she sacrificed herself to the capital, so therefore becoming a slave to the capital. Even though the question already is, isn't she already considered a slave of some sorts? Because of how the capital was just treating everybody, going through the Reaping, the tributes, etc. The next stage, meeting the mentor. Hey Mitch, who was a previous victor for the 12th District. Actually, I think, if I remember correctly, he was considered the only district. He was considered one of the only victors for the 12th District. And he gives Katniss practical advice on how to survive the games, as well as convinces Katniss to act as if she's in love with Peeta, which is the male representative in the games. And he comes across in a way as a drunk, but when he comes down to it, he's actually a individual that does care. He just, I think, in a lot of ways, he's seen many tributes die, and in his best way to cope with it, does drink. So, a very depressed individual who I actually think represents the Hunger Games to a T, because when you think of the victors, you may think that you may have it all sunshine. Well, no, you're still stuck in the games, as Katniss will discover later on in the story. Another mentor is, and I'm already going to botch this one up, but his name was Sin, I believe, Cinna or Sin. I don't know how to say his name, but he was Katniss' stylist, and he was a close friend to her, and gave her the hope and motivation needed to endure through the games. Basically helped her become known as the Girl on Fire, due to his great stylist choice. Alright, and the next stage we have, and this is where it starts getting a little juicy in my opinion, you have the tests, allies, and enemies. Before the games, each tribute was granted time to train and display their strengths. Well, Katniss becomes aware of the wealthier districts, which were 1 through 4, and poses them as a major threat, which does end up becoming a thing later on, and gained some potential sponsors for Howard's bow skills, or for her bow skills. And for instance, this is actually one trait that shows her in her hero's journey. So, a lot of people underestimated her because she was a female, which nobody should ever do. Women characters are some of the strongest characters in literature and cinematic history. And Katniss, it basically responds to how the Capitol were treating her, because they were just laughing among themselves and not treating her well. Well, she decided to, at the last minute, shoot an arrow through a pig that they were eating, and basically the apple stuck to the wall. And she basically bowed and left. Well, she basically realized at that point that she made enemies. But in the end, she did gain some sponsorships from it. So clearly some people definitely respected what she did. But in the end, and along the way, she made some enemies. Okay. Crossing the threshold. So this is right when Katniss basically enters this new world. She enters through the Hunger Games itself. She basically knows that now it is do or die. So she enters the games, and in many ways, she refuses to kill, and she just does things to survive. So she takes her survival instincts, and it helps her survive throughout the games. So, approach to the innermost cave. So, to escape the tributes from the lower districts, Katniss does hide in a tree, and she was hiding from people such as PETA, who actually was using it as a way to get them off her trail. Eventually, Katniss does get trapped by the other tributes, and a girl named as Rue from District 11 helps her in her escape, which does end up costing her eventually her life. The ordeal stage. So when we talk about the ordeal stage, this is the time where basically the character goes through a significant change. A change of heart. Or a death made the character change how they felt. So, in a lot of ways, Katniss, this is when she realized that Rue could have been her sister in a situation. And she doesn't wish that upon anybody else in the districts or the games. So she makes a peace offering doing the District 11 symbol, and since it is a televised situation, District 11 saw this, and obviously gave their love and support to Katniss throughout the games. And even in novelization, the male tribute for District 11 actually spared Katniss because of how or because of how she handled that death and situation. Basically considered her an ally. So, the reward. So when we talk about the reward stage, so Katniss, as well as PETA, who, is considered either the love interest or the male representative, however you take PETA in the first book, they both live, but instead Katniss, she used her intelligence and actually found a way to overcome the games, to overcome the Capitol, basically make them eat their own dust, per se. So, when the Capitol made the Hunger Games, they made it to ensure that each district felt inferior, to make them feel like there was nothing they could do to stop the Hunger Games because of a revolt that happened several years ago. Well, Katniss decided that, hey, the games need a winner, right? So, her and Peter were actually going to commit suicide by eating the berries. Well, in a last-ditch survival, they were going to do it. Because originally the Capitol said that they would allow 2 winners. Because of the popular topic of star-crossed lovers became, popular within everybody. So, when we talk about reward stage, Katniss, as well as PETA, they both got to live. But it's because Katniss used her brain to outsmart the Capitol. Because, the Capitol was actually going to let them do it, but then people were obviously not happy about it, because they wanted to see the 2 lovers win the games. So Katniss used her brain to outsmart the Capitol, which it was a smart choice at that situation, but for Katniss later on, it could prove to be very deadly. So, the roadblock. Homeward bound. So Katniss had defied the Capitol a single winner, as I mentioned. But she realizes that messing with the Capitol was not the right choice. And basically, she was forced to live the life that her and PETA made for each other, which was star-crossed lovers. And at this point, she didn't really know if she liked him or not in that way. And, President Snow actually forces her to play with that lovebird act. So he basically sensed that it wasn't true. So the games will forever haunt her. She'll be just like Haymitch in some ways, which is seeing other people going through these games. Will she feel the same way? Yes. She's going to be the one training these other people, watching them die, watching them kill others. She realizes that the games are never simply just going away. the resurrection stage. So Katniss eventually does agree with the Capitol, and then comes to a realization that Snow is a very dangerous man. But she also fears that a fight or revolt could occur from her actions within the games, which does end up happening later, yes, and it is part of her own actions. But as I mentioned, she didn't want to be considered that hero, not yet. Actually, not even not yet. She didn't even want to be considered that because she didn't want that responsibility on her shoulders. So return with the elixir, or return as a champion, as I call it. So Katniss and Peeta do return back to the 12th District as heroes, but they return to a new life, full of wealth and fame. Well, Peeta basically finds out that Katniss never really felt this way about him, and obviously has changed feelings about her. At least it's hinted at that. And then basically others around her either feel inferior to her, such as Gale, or they just, treat her as they wouldn't have treated her before, which was as a champion. So she has a newfound sense of peace in her life. Excuse me. Excuse me again, sorry. Lost my voice. So Katniss finds that new life that she wanted, or that she mentioned early on, but is this really what she wanted? And the answer to that is most likely no. As most heroes, when they embrace the hero's journey, they dream of success, they dream of finding a new life. That new life usually entails a path that leads to an outcome they don't really want. Such as Luke Skywalker, when he found out that Darth Vader was his father. That wasn't a path that he really wanted to follow, so he forged his own path. Katniss Everdeen, she forged her own path, but with this new path, she had to live a life of, at least at the time, of a lie, which could haunt anybody. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that I wanted you to think, what makes her different? Well, here are some things that I came up with. So Katniss, as I mentioned basically throughout the entire presentation, she didn't want to be looked at as an icon of rebellion. And most heroes are considered strong individuals, such as a Luke Skywalker who uses the Force, who becomes very powerful at the end of his journey, or even someone like Wolverine who, obviously has the brute strength. Well, Katniss doesn't really have that kind of strength. But what she lacks in, exterior strength, she has inner strength. She uses her intelligence to survive the games. She uses her brain, which is a thing that most characters do in the end, yes, but what she excelled at. And one thing that made her different, too, is she wasn't real charismatic. She didn't really get along with people. She actually came across as kind of as a quote-unquote mean person to some people. And there were some other choice words I could have said, but I think you all get the point. So she kind of came across as she kind of just didn't get along with people, and I get that. She was very much an introvert. Now, what makes her similar to some other characters that we've mentioned? She's the underdog. So when we think of the underdog, I think of somebody like a Luke Skywalker, who was considered the underdog. Because compared to Vader, yeah, he had no strength, really, compared to him. He wasn't as good at the Force as him or anything. Katniss was considered the underdog, and probably for the wrong reasons. But like I mentioned, where she lacked in physical strength like Peeta, she had interior strength. She found the way to outsmart everybody, how to make allies. And I think the one trait that I loved about her was that she didn't fight for herself. Most heroes don't fight for themselves, and she refused to kill in cold blood. So in several occasions, she could have killed other people, but she avoided every possible outcome of that if she could. And if I remember correctly, I think she only had to kill one person, and that was because they were going to kill Rue, or no, they did kill Rue. So that was her form of basically anger. And she adopts the Mockingjay mentality through the pin given by Rue, which is actions speak louder than words. So, in her case, she doesn't talk much, but her actions prove that she is a hero in the making. And as a way to close this off, I wanted you to reiterate that the hero's journey defines and makes a hero who they are. The journey is the same regardless of the story, and the story can appear in different forms, such as characters and stories. So in Harry Potter, I don't know if I consider Harry Potter the underdog just because he was known as the boy who lived. In the case of Katniss, she was the underdog. She had to carry on that mantle of being basically a lost lover in the games. And yeah, she played with it very well, but she did that for survival. And she did it so she didn't have to kill Peeta. Because she knew that if Peeta or her had to die, it was going to be one or the other. Unless if she didn't use her thought of, both of them killing each other, they wouldn't have made it out of the games. Okay, and then the last thing that I want to discuss is an activity that I want all of us to consider. So, this will be due eventually, but each student will be doing a project based on one character of their choosing. That's not Katniss Everdeen, because I already did her. So I want you to take that character and show how have they embraced the hero's journey. And make a presentation that contains material for about 5 to 10 minutes. And it's due Monday before class. Each student will fill out a sign-off sheet indicating when they will present. So anybody can choose any character they want. And it really won't be that difficult, I promise. And then last thing before you guys all go, may the odds be ever in your favor. Thank you, class. I hope you have a good day, and please stay safe out there.